Super. So, first question for everybody is does anybody need leads?
Always. Yeah.
4 or 5 hands went up. Okay. We got some work to do. Um, Gavin was talking earlier about metaphors, and one of the things that's also important to think about is using story as a way of being able to connect to your clients. And I went back to a few years ago. I was working with a guy who was in the medical insurance sales business. And he was just a young guy, and he would go out to these various networking functions. And he said, it's good I do the presentation. I may get one person to come up and talk to me after. And he said, but I'd like to get more people talking to me. So I said to him, I said, okay, well, do your presentation. Show me what you're doing. And when I was watching what he was doing, he had a flip chart, and he was putting his company's information on the left-hand side of the flip chart and his competitors' information on the right side of the flip chart. Now, if you know brain science, what we hear last is what we remember. So what was he doing? He was selling his competitors' products. So that was one thing we looked at. But the other part of the whole situation was they said, why did you get into the business? And he said, well, my wife is the daughter of the owner of the company. He said, so I pretty well had to. And I said, no. What was it that influenced you to get into the business? And he said, well, when I was younger, he said, my mom was a single parent and she got critically ill. And we almost became homeless because she wasn't able to work and earn an income. And I looked at him, I said, have you ever told that story when you're doing your networking or doing a presentation at a networking function or talk to your clients and share that? He said, no. And I said, well, start with that. When you're talking to your clients, tell them what's happened in your life, why you are doing what you're doing. And he did that. And when he had a group of, say, 20 to 30 people there, more than half of the audience would come up afterwards and talk to him. So story can be a very powerful way of attracting clients and a way of generating leads. But some of the challenges that I'm sure I've seen in the mortgage brokerage business, as well as other professional services businesses, and I've worked with professionals on and off for probably about 40 years now, is they look at marketing today, and particularly with AI and everything else going on, as too complex, too difficult. They struggle with differentiating from the competitors. So here's the thing, in most professional industries, you're all basically trained the same way. Your products and services are very similar, if not the same. The people you work with, you basically have something that you do that helps them. But how do you actually differentiate yourself in the market? Many people in business, professionals in particular, see marketing as expensive. And if marketing is seen as expensive, that means you're doing it wrong, because marketing should be an investment in potential revenue. Most people that I've seen in business today, they have no strategy, no plan, no system, and no way to measure it. So they don't really know if it's working or not. The only way they know is if they get a contact that wants to get a mortgage. And your competitors include banks and their brokers. The regulations are different. They don't have to go through the same rigorous certification that you do. So those are some typical challenges. Here's my question for you, though. Do you need more leads? Well, if you're not getting traffic through your website, your email, your social media, phone calls, etc., you probably do need more leads. But in many cases, there's a problem with lead generation from the perspective of looking at, first of all, how many leads do you need? Do you need 1,000? Or do you just need a small number? Second, when you get the leads, is there a lead conversion problem? So a lead conversion problem might be they're not understanding what differentiates you from your competitors? And when you do get leads, how many actually become customers? Do you track that? Part of it might be your offer is not compelling enough. So what are you missing in the formula in talking to your customers to attract them to work with you? And is there a retention problem? You get a lead, they're kind of wobbling on whether they want to do work with you or not, or are you having an attrition rate? You know, one of the things that's happening in this this day and age now is that seniors are downsizing. So they're not taking out the big mortgages anymore. In fact, they're probably using their mortgage to finance other things, including holidays, etc. So we work with clients to go through a lead generation process, which starts with basically targeting the audience, then determining what information you're going to share with them, what content, and how you can create a campaign to generate those leads. Then how do you capture your leads, qualify your leads, and get them into your database so you can follow up? Because many times you may talk to somebody and it's a year or two later they decide that they need a mortgage. So how do you keep track of them? How do you stay with them through that process of thinking? How do you engage them in a sales conversation? And how do you convert them to paying customers? And what is the conversion process? So here's the other secret as well, is that marketing is not an event. It's not a one-time and done. It's a process. You need to set up a system and a process to make it work. So here's some of the common and most reliable lead sources. Referral and word of mouth. How many get a lot of referrals through word of mouth? LinkedIn content and outreach for business to business contacts. A lot of times business owners may have a roster of contacts that you can reach out to if you build trust with them. Email marketing to your database, and that's not selling products, that's providing information that's useful to your people, the database that you have. Creating strategic partnerships. So obvious ones are real estate companies, maybe banks. Where do you have partnerships? Joint ventures or strategic alliances. One of the ways that I built my business when I first started out is I got into the speaking world and I started doing free presentations. And then one day the light went on and I went, hold on a second here, there are people actually getting paid for presentations. So I got paid to do presentations and I built my marketing business doing that. So it was a double-edged sword. SEO is a long-term approach, search engine optimization. There's a lot of people who will call business and say, hey, I can optimize your website, do SEO for you. It's generally a waste of time until you get to a certain size of business. Or paid ads is another one, Google paid ads. First thing to think about is to start with a strategy. What's your strategy? Which audience are you going to go after and so on? Not tactics. Typically what most people do is they look at the bright shiny object called AI now and they go, oh, look, I can do this all with AI. I don't need a plan. I just throw it into AI and it'll do all the work for me. Not true. So the things we need to look at is who's the target audience? Do we have a unique brand? And I'm talking in this case, like Enrich is the company brand, but what's your personal brand? How do people become attracted to you because of who you are and your personal brand? What's the message that you deliver? Do you help solve people's pain? What's the pain that most people have nowadays? Well, I can tell you one of the biggest ones is most people these days are over leveraged. They're 1.64 debt ratio to their income. So very difficult to qualify. What media do you use? And what's the timing? When do you put your campaign out and so on? One thing not to do is like Mabel Peabody is try to be all things to all people. She's got a beauty parlor, chainsaw repair, and a nightclub. Don't do that. Try and find a select audience that you can work with. Here's a company that's got a unique brand. shit you don't need. In other words, they're recycling in, products and services that people don't need anymore. It catches attention, so it stands out amongst all of the other businesses in the same business. So your target audience. As you're targeting fuzzy, you don't know really who your leads are or your customers are, and the leads are inconsistent, probably because you haven't defined who your ideal customer is, our ideal client. What's their buying triggers? What are their pains? Who's the decision maker? In business, it might be the owner, the VP, the director, but in our personal lives, it could be the husband, the wife, it could be a relative that's investing in a property, etc. And here's the real clue is if you can niche to a specific target market, that accelerates your lead generation capability, plus builds recognition in that market. The key really is we need to build, first of all, knowledge. So people are aware of how mortgage brokers work, how you can work with them to help them. Second, we need to build likability, have people like us. Third, we want to build trust. And nowadays, trust is a very fragile component in a sales relationship. And the reason being is there's businesses that are here today, gone tomorrow. There's people in your industry go into the industry and they go, oh, this is too tough, I'm getting out. There's realtors that there's 8,700 realtors in the city. And I'll guarantee you maybe 5% of them are actually making a living because they thought it would be an easy buck. So we need to build that know, like, and trust. Here's what not to do. Same company name, 4 different companies, 4 different logos. When I was looking for this particular company, because I saw its name come up, I went, oh my God, wrong thing to do. Don't take a name that somebody else has got and use it. Another thing to think about is if your own personal name is difficult to pronounce, help people figure out how they pronounce it or use a different name for your business. We worked a number of years ago with a bank called the Bank of Alberta, and they were merging with a bank from Vancouver, and it was called Pacific and Western Bank. And so they approached us about naming the bank and providing branding expertise. So this was 1986, long before the internet. And in 86, what was happening was interest rates, mortgage rates included, were through the roof. I know my mortgage went up to 23.5%. So the challenge for banks was most of the banking was done with an Eastern-based bank. These 2 banks said, no, we want to deal with Western Canadians. We're going to help Western Canadians because Eastern Canada doesn't really understand the Western market. So we came up with Canadian Western Bank, first off as a brand. You'll notice the colors are quite different from most standard banks. And our tag was, the real interest is you. So in the process of building these banks, they were the first bank to have drive-through banking, sit-down banking, and telephone banking. That was part of the strategy. Made them different from the rest of them. So again, it's all about strategy and differentiation. Here's a realtor in Toronto who has branded his company with his own personal name and used a monogram. That's a symbol of used letters to be able to create a way of standing out in the market. He only deals with high-end home sales, so $1 million and up. And what he does is he distinguishes himself and his company by putting out a magazine that goes to high net worth people, all about real estate. He does several other things as well. But the key here is it's distinctive because he uses a monogram as a symbol and he approaches different market, a targeted market. So what are some ways of being able to generate leads? Well, these are 3 key areas. I'm not going to read this to you, and my slides will be available in a handout at the end through Google. So one way is public relations. That's an earned way of getting attention. So you have to have a message that's worthy, that helps educate the public and gets shared. Advertising is another way. You pay for it. It's an investment. And then owned media is anything you control. It could be your website, it could be your e-newsletter or blog, etc. It's anything you control, your marketing materials, etc. The ideal is the blend of all three to be able to generate traffic and generate leads. So this is in the Google Drive as well, just some top lead generation tools that you can consider. But first of all, before you invest in any AI intelligent media or lead generation tools, make sure you have the right strategy. Do you have a CRM system? Does your CRM system allow you to be able to post automatically through LinkedIn or through Facebook or any of the other social media? Because with your CRM, if you've got your database organized, you can tag individuals and build segments of the market. So LinkedIn, I know a lot of brokers don't necessarily go on LinkedIn, but if you're working business to business, you can generate leads through business owners, etc. Then the key on LinkedIn is not to pitch, not to tell people what you do for a living. You educate them. You want to provide them information that's helpful and useful. Build a connection request because you have something in common. And this is true with any niche that you build, is what do you have in common with those people? Maybe it's a personal interest, a hobby. It could be a sport. It could be family events. There's a wide range. Maybe you love to travel. Those are some ways you can connect up with people that's not pitching them, not trying to sell them. Make sure your profile is complete. I don't know how many profiles I look at in LinkedIn in particular where the headshot is missing, the background is missing, the information is not there. Same's true with Facebook. If you use Facebook or any other social media, make sure you put a complete profile together. Do you have testimonials from people who have been your customers in the past? Because those go a long ways to building trust. If you have testimonials that share with people what they benefited from working with you. In LinkedIn as well, there's a tool called Navigator where you can increase your number of connections per day, etc. I would say at first, don't go there, just start building the connections in LinkedIn, etc. Same with Facebook, you can go in and build connections, invite people to become friends, etc. So if you are putting together any information that you're sending out, whether it's an email or a brochure, or you're presenting a networking function and so on, there's two formulas I want you to think about. First formula is what I call the FAB formula. That's features, advantages, benefits. Most people, brokers are included in this, sell features. I can get you X number of percent over so many years, etc. We have a national network, so we can work with you across Canada, whatever those are all features. What you want to sell to customers is the benefits. So it's like going into a restaurant, you get a menu, it's got 100 items on the menu. Do you order everything? No, you look for what feels good to you for that particular day. Which product do you want and what's the benefit to you that day? If you're doing a diet, then you're probably not going to buy a burger with a bun and fries. So features, advantages, and benefits, sell benefits. If people are looking at your competitors and trying to decide between you and your competitors, what's the advantages you provide over and above your competitors? So the second formula to think about is if you're doing any marketing at all and you're putting information out to sell what you do, or even if you're putting a story together that you want to share with people, think about, first of all, we have to interrupt their thinking. Most people's brains are full. They've heard a lot of information. They've done a lot of research. Maybe they've talked to all their friends and family. So they've got lots of information, but we need to interrupt that information to be able to get a message in their head. Then we need to be able to engage them. And that's through a subheadline. The engagement is talking about a benefit that they might get from working with you. Then we've got to educate them. So make it easy, make it convenient, make it fully understood. And the last part is the offer. What can you do? Can you set up a call with them? Can you do a free assessment for them? Can you help them work with their finances? Maybe you have some contacts in the finance industry that can help them sort out the finances. Those might be the offers. You got to have a convincing headline, whatever's going to attract attention. So here's a great ad. It's your friends helped you move once. They're still mad about it. It's a moving company. So does that catch attention? This is inside a bus. Have a system and a process. One of the things that we do with clients is we help them create what I call an editorial planning calendar or a marketing planning calendar. So one of the challenges for most people, and yourselves included, is you're busy. You've got a lot of things on your plate. The last thing that you have to think about is, oh, what am I going to talk about this week if I'm doing a post? If I'm sending out an email, what am I going to talk about? So sit down and plan 3 to 6 months, maybe a year ahead of time as to the topics you want to talk about, where you can find some information about that, and also maybe even some graphics, etc., pictures that you can use with it. And when you do that, then when it comes to posting, if you're doing posts or sending out emails, etc., newsletters to people, you've got a calendar you can look at and say, oh yeah, this week I'm going to talk about this. So important to have a schedule. We worked with an accountant who's specifically tied to the construction industry. That's the majority of her customers. So we created an explainer video. But one of the things that we also did for her, because there's thousands of accountants, just like there's thousands of mortgage brokers, thousands of realtors, is we created a mascot called him Benny the Beaver, being in the construction business. So that was her image that was used everywhere. And we did an explainer video talking about her services. Then when we posted on LinkedIn for her, because she does business to business, we created LinkedIn posts with Benny in it and a different message every week. We also did a newsletter and created different topics. So first of all, we created the editorial calendar, and then every week published a newsletter. And that went out through email to our contacts, went out through LinkedIn, Facebook, and other channels that we used. So lead capture. Many of you already have a website that you use. This is my website here. So from a lead capture perspective, we have a chat bot down at the bottom. And that, if people use the chat bot, it connects up with us. We can help answer their questions. We've got schedule a consultation. We've got free training. And we've got it's called the Profit Accelerator software, where we can help do an analysis for clients, but there's a test module of that people can go into and just have a quick look at. Plus, we've got email at the top, and we've got all the social media channels that we use. So those are things to think about if you have a website that you're using, or even a single page that you're using. Those are things you can integrate with it. We also have a free book that you can download. That'll be in the Google Drive at the end. Here's the profit acceleration software I was talking about, and we can actually track and measure or figure out where the gaps are in your marketing. We have up to 48 different areas that we analyze, and then we provide a report at the end of the analysis. So we can do 3 to 5 different areas, and generally for most businesses, that gives them a pretty good idea where the gaps are in their marketing. From a lead perspective and lead qualification, who are your ideal customers? Those are your A leads. And in sales, they often talk about A, B, or C leads. A leads are the customers that have the need. They're urgently looking to solve that problem. They have the money in the budget. They're in your service area, and they are the decision maker. That's an A lead. A B lead might be someone that doesn't have all of those particular qualifications, but they could be a potential customer. A C lead is probably somebody who's just out looking around to see who's out there, and they may not have any of the qualifications. And so those are probably the least opportune places to find leads is a C category. And nowadays with CRM systems, customer relationship management systems, or AI, a lot of times you can figure out the qualifications of the ideal customers because a lot of that's available through the internet. Sales engagement. Here's some interesting statistics. This is typical across industries. Most salespeople, and I consider mortgage brokers salespeople, 40%, 48% never follow up after an initial contact. 44% give up after one follow-up call or one follow-up attempt. 73% abandon the leads after one or two follow-ups. 80% of sales nowadays requires 5 to 12 or more contacts with the customer. But the secret there is not picking up the phone every week and saying, hey, are you ready to buy now? How about now? You want to use different channels to be able to connect with the customer, provide useful and helpful information. So when they're at a decision point, you're at the top of the ladder. So that can be done doing this sort of training or being able to learn these skill sets and create a sales plan can be very helpful as well in generating leads. So here's the key. Consistent leads don't come from doing more marketing. They come from building a system that works every week, even when you're on vacation. So here is a QR code. This has a connection to my Google Drive, and it has those documents I mentioned in there, as well as an article on lead generation. And so you're welcome to capture this. Like I say, there'll be that information in the Google Drive. And so at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions.